Broadcast has been set.
Good evening, afternoon, everyone. My name is Edward Burrows, Chair of the Policy and Governance Committee. I'd like to call this meeting to order at 5:02 p.m. Can we just go around the room and allow each of the committee members and staff to introduce themselves as well, starting with Ms. Ahmed.
Thank you, Chairman Burrows. Hi, everybody. My name is Rahila Ahmed. I am the Vice Chair of the Policy and Governance Committee for the Board of Education, as well as the District 5 representative on the board.
Board Member Mickens-Murray.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Judy Mickens-Murray. I'm a board member and a member of the Policy and Governance Committee.
Board Member Saran Ruiz.
Hello, everyone. My name is Alvaro Saran Ruiz. I am the student member of the Board of Education and also a member of the Policy and Governance Committee.
Okay, and I see Vice Chair Williams has joined us.
Good afternoon, it's Sonia Williams. I represent the southern part of the county where we rock, and I am the vice chair. Thank you for hosting the meeting. I'm excited about our agenda today.
Awesome, me too. And then we'll start with, I guess, our board staff.
Anise Ellis, Board Assistant.
And Brandon Cooper, Director of Policy.
Okay, and now our superintendent, CEO staff.
Good afternoon, Valerie Irvin, representing the CEO.
Good evening, everyone. Erica White, Office of General Counsel.
Good afternoon, Office of Compliance and Ethics.
Good to see you. Well, thank everyone for being here. We will now, my chair's remarks are pretty brief. I look forward to a productive meeting where we will be able to talk through and work through a host of issues with several of the policies that will impact our school district from years to come. So I look forward to this being a very collaborative meeting. Is there a motion to adopt the agenda today?
So moved.
Was there a second?
Second.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any abstention?
Aye.
Unanimous. Is there a motion to approve the committee minutes, June 16th and August 26th?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I haven't seen the minutes. I mean, should I see them?
Okay, they're on board docs. So if you go to board docs on the Policy and Governance Committee, item 4, both minutes are there. In order to give Mickens-Murray the opportunity to review the minutes, let's just hold off on approving these until our next meeting so that all members are afforded the opportunity to review them.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
No problem. Next, we'll move to item 2.1, public comment for registered speakers. There are none. Next, we'll move to 2.2, public comment for labor partners. There are none. Next, we'll move to 3.1, a policy review schedule, and I'll turn it over to our policy director.
Good evening, everyone. At the last meeting, the committee requested that I work with our administration partners to come up with a schedule review for policies for the next academic year. And so I just want to make sure I thank Ms. Valerie Irvin, Ms. Robin Welsh, and last but not least, Ms. Erica White for their contributions to coming up with a document that is posted on board docs for your review. It includes all of the CEO's recommended policies review this year, all the policies that were not finished from last year. It also includes select policies from the 8,000 and 9,000 series. Upon initial review, it was just too much to include all of the 8,000, 9,000. And so I worked with the committee leadership to identify ones that should be prioritized for this year. I put a note at the very beginning. As we all know, Board Bylaw 9340 allows the committee chair to adjust the policies that are reviewed at each agenda meeting. And so I want to underscore that this document is really a guide, a planning document. It's non-binding, and it's really more so for staff so that we are able to prioritize and timeline the extensive legwork that goes into making sure these policies comply with all regulations and laws and shared common goal of improving our school system. And so that's a document for review. It's non-binding, so it doesn't require a vote. But we will keep this updated and use it particularly for staff to guide us as we move forward throughout the academic year.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Cooper, Ms. Valerie Irvin, Ms. Robin Welsh, and Ms. Erica White. Thank you all so much for the work that you did. I do believe this document will hopefully keep the committee organized as we move forward. I see a hand from Sonia Williams. You're on mute.
Sorry about that. Thank you for acknowledging me. Can we get a quick briefing on the process of what we can expect when these policies are reviewed? So the schedule is there, and I understand that it is flexible and fluid. So when an item comes up for review, what can we expect as the process? This is my first time being on the policy committee, so I'd love to understand what to expect when an existing policy is up for review and when a new policy is presented. What can we expect as far as how we're going to walk through the review process and how we're going to allow changes? For example, we have policies, I think 0108, I believe it is, that's up for review at this meeting. Are we expected to provide comments? And then the next time when we have a meeting, we will make changes. So I just wanted to get an understanding of what to expect.
Yes, I'll give a brief overview of my understanding, then I'll turn it over to Mr. Cooper for the official by policy explanation. All the policies that we have on the agenda today are simply for discussion. Hopefully this will give the committee an opportunity to engage in discourse around them, things that we like, things that we don't like. Maybe there are things that we want more research on. Maybe there are more questions that we have than answers. And so this, the initial bite of the apple is simply a discussion. What we do by posting the agenda days in advance, you can also start emailing your questions in before the meeting if you want. There's nothing that says you can't do that. So if there are questions that you want before we have the discussion before the board, feel free to email those questions to Mr. Cooper. Mr. Cooper will work with Ms. Irvin and Ms. Robin Welsh and Ms. Erica White to get those answered prior to the meeting. I know they meet regularly. If questions arise during the meeting, we will bring them back at our follow-up meeting, at our next meeting, once we have them answered. And there could be questions that might come up that they can answer, well before our next meeting, right? Maybe next week they might have the answer for you already prepared. And I have no, they can give them to you whenever they're available. But today, I would say that, we're going to go through these policies, we're going to discuss. There could be some debate around policy points. Members might want to compromise on the floor. It might, it's helpful for me to hear what your sticking points are in this discussion phase, what for the voting phase, so I hope we can, what sticking points are, wherever those areas of consensus are, let's just get them all out, at this meeting. Then at a future meeting, we can move to approve them with recommendations, or I believe we actually send them out for public comment. And Mr. Cooper, can you walk us through the official process after that?
Certainly. So the 9 through 40 outlines the development process for policies. And as you mentioned, it's up to the committee. They can review as many meetings as they want. But when the committee feels comfortable with the policies, the next step is for the committee to vote to send it to the Board of Education for going out public comment. And so a vote by the committee in the first vote is just to send out public comment. And then it goes to the Board of Education, and the Board of Education will vote whether or not to send it out to public comment. In policy, it states you have 2 weeks to review it. The public provides feedback, and then it comes back to this committee for review, additional edits. Throughout all this time, edits can be made. It is then the second time that the committee votes that it is going to the board for approval. And at that time, the board has to do a first and second reader process. And so the first reader is just to review, and then at the next board meeting is when second reader comes. And that time, if it does pass second reader, then it does become enacted as official policy. If it impacts students, we don't want to be changing things for students in the middle of the year. So the policy states that anything that impacts students directly takes effect at the end of the academic school year, no matter when it was passed, and that's in June. In discussions with General Counsel's office, if it's not impacting students, the understanding is that it's implemented immediately upon second reader. And the last item I'll point out is that in board bylaw 9340, it states that that process can be amended at any time by a vote of the board. And so the process is there as a guideline, but it can be amended in any way, shape, or form by the Board of Education.
Yeah, so I'm very familiar with the process after it leaves the committee. And I'm glad that you were able to share that with the public who may not be familiar with the process after it leaves committee. I think it's important for us as a committee to understand how much time we're going to spend on policy, because policy is one of the most important things that we do as board members, and we don't want to rush that process. We want to be able to understand and gather information and data to ensure that we're making the best decision to improve the system. Policy is just not about writing policy just to say we make changes, but it's about improving the system. And so the policies that are on the agenda today, I just wanted to really understand how much time we had to discuss the policy. So if it's brought today, I think there were like 4 or 5 policies or 3 or 4 policies that were presented for today that we received an update about 4 hours ago. This policy, the policies that are on this agenda, I just wanted to be clear that we're not expected to have to move on all of these policy items today. That a policy that's on the agenda item today may require us to seek more information and data that staff, the administration staff may have to come back and present that data to us to sort of understand where we stand today and any changes that we make to the policy, what we could expect to occur by changing the policy if there is a change. I know that there may be some policies that we say, oh, this is good, we're just going to move it along. But I just really wanted to be clear that if we come across a policy that is on any of the agenda, this one or future agendas that may have to cycle through several board meetings, several committee meetings before it's moved to the next step, that is the expectation. So I just wanted to be clear on that, on the work that we're doing here as the committee. Is it the expectation that the items that are put on each committee meeting, that they would be moving along, or do we have an opportunity for one or more to survive over several board meetings? So that's what I just wanted to get clarity on.
Yep, and I apologize if I wasn't clear earlier, but the answer to your question is the policies on the agenda today. It is not my expectation that we vote on any of them. It is my expectation that there's going to be a lot of discourse and comment, and I'm going to have a better perspective of where you're coming from. You're going to know where Ms. McMurray is coming from. And I assume that there will be some level of follow-up. There are some policies that maybe we think are perfect and we all agree on. I mean, if there's a simple policy and all of us read it ahead of the meeting in our briefing packet, or that's on board docs, and we're all good to go, we might move that one because we're good to go. But if there are policies that require a deeper dive and the majority of the committee feels that way, then that's what will occur.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. That's what I wanted to hear. I just wanted to make sure that I was
Ms. Williams, I
clear
just
on
want to
the
give Ms. Ahmed a chance.
Okay.
Thank you, Chairman Burrows. I just wanted to provide some historical context for y'all when it comes to this. As the previous chair of this committee, we as a committee last year, we took very many actions on policies on the meetings that they were introduced to the committee. Mind you, there were some policies that were very, that required a lot more work. And so those ones we heard time and time again, but I did want to make it clear that there were several policies that were introduced in committee, and we voted on those in the committees, in the committee meeting in which they were introduced. And that just required a little bit of communication, right? There's a function in board docs for administrative content where staff would, upon request of the chair and vice chair, indicate, okay, this is something that we'll only discuss because it is something that involves a lot of layers. Or this is something that we can consider voting on, stuff like that. But I did want to make it clear that there were very many policies that move forward, and based upon our process, it's going to come back to us, right? A policy approval here is just approving, a policy approval at the beginning of the process is just approving it to go out for public comment. And then we have the opportunity, and we will have the ability to come back after public comment to do a lot more of the digging, so.
Right, and I appreciate that, because this again is my first time on the committee, and board member Mickens Murray, this is her first time in this new sort of environment. So I think it's important that we fully understand the expectation. And so I appreciate that. And I just wanted to be clear that because each of the agendas that have been set in the work plan, they're like, several agenda policy items that are being reviewed. And so if one sort of carries over to several meetings, that just makes the agenda a little bit larger. So I just wanted to understand logistically, what is the expectation, and to be clear that there is an opportunity for there to be fruitful discussion, not discourse, fruitful discussion, so that we understand that when we make a policy from scratch, or when we are changing a policy, that there is a measurable improvement in the system, in the school system. That is why the policy is being changed. And so that I just want to just make sure that that was clear. And so I appreciate the comments, and thank you for sharing what historically has been done and being open to, the comments and concerns of the committee members. So thank you. That's all.
Yeah, I was, my comment was intended to be a standalone comment, although it's related to what you were discussing. So I did want to make that clear that this is kind of like a standalone comment to advise members of the committee, and I didn't mean to open up a can of worms over here.
Okay, thank you very much, Chairwoman Ahmed. Next, we will move to item 3.2, policy 0118, basic commitments. Mr. Cooper.
I'll yield to my colleagues in administration who took the lead on drafting those policies in response to legal requirements. So.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for considering our suggested revisions to this policy. The administration is recommending the addition of gender identity and sexual orientation to the list of protected classes in the policy statement on page 1 of the policy. And we've also updated the standard section to reflect the strategic imperatives that will guide the equity work of the school system.
Those make a lot of sense to me to be included. Ms. Ahmed.
Thank you, Chairman Burrows. I wanted to offer the suggestion and really make an amendment to the policy of adding citizenship status to that identification list. Many of you all know that I'm the daughter of immigrants, and I used to work for a national immigrant training and advocacy organization. So it's really important for me that we explicitly add citizenship status to the identification list in this policy in 0118, but also in the next policy 0125. And so I wanted to put that up as an amendment to the policy. If we take a vote on it today, then I, put that, I can add that as an amendment to the motion. If we're not voting on it, then that's just something to be added for staff later on.
So I'll definitely take note of it and make sure that we work with our colleagues to look into amending that and see if there's any impacts to it and let you know either way if there's any issue. I don't foresee, but we had to look into it and make sure. So if that's sufficient for you, I don't think a no vote is needed, but if you need a vote, you can as well.
I was going to yield to the committee chairman on whether or not we should take a vote on it or whether we can just wait until staff comes back. I don't mind either way.
Let's, Ms. White, your two additions are what exactly again, just for the record?
They are adding the language gender identity and sexual orientation to the list of protected classes, and also bringing in the strategic imperatives from the equity that would guide the equity lens of Prince George's County Public Schools.
And Ms. Ahmed, your amendment is what, just for the record?
To add citizenship status to the list of protected classes that is noted in our policy 0118 and 0125.
Yeah, I mean, those are the only changes. I'm comfortable with moving on it, but if there is some unreadiness, I'd like to hear it now before I call for a motion. I see Ms. Mickens Murray has her hand up. I think you're talking, Ms. Mickens Murray.
Okay, I'm learning. Unmute. Okay, I would like to, I don't have a personal problem with adding the citizenship, but I want to make sure, I want at the administration to make sure there are no negative impacts to adding it. So that's everything else I'm okay with. I read it beforehand and I'm okay with everything that's in this document. But I just want to make sure. And if you can pretty much assure me the folks that are in the room on this Zoom, then I don't mind moving forward. Just assure me there are no negative impacts to the students when you get to citizenship. Because with immigration, we don't want to fix one thing and create a different problem. That's all I'm saying.
Ms. White, do you have a preliminary response, or would you like to take that back and come back to the committee?
That's what I was going to say, Mr. Burrows. If possible, can we take that back and then come back to the committee after we've had some time to look at it and study it some more?
Sure, no problem.
Thank you.
I guess this is a question for Ms. Ahmed. Because our policy timeline is so long, do you want to hold this completely until they look at it? I'm fine either way.
I think it's okay. I would be okay with moving it forward as is to the full board for public comment, with the notation that this is something that is being discussed or will be discussed if and when the policy comes back from public comment. Just to move the process along, I'm okay with that. If that is okay with the rest of the committee.
Yeah, and then based off of their feedback, once it comes back to this committee, we can still tack that on at that time, right?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I see Ms. Mickens Murray has her hand up.
Okay, so the public will know that we are considering adding this if the administration comes back, that it's okay. Because if they're going to give us public comment, it needs to include that, I think.
Well, the reality is that any member at any point in time can offer an amendment on any of these policies. So even if it goes up for first reader, after the public comment period for the policy committee has concluded, there will still be a public comment period for the public board meeting. Even on second reader, there'll be another public comment period for second reader. So any point in time, once it goes to second reader, a member could amend citizenship on it then, right? And so
okay, so what you're saying, so are you saying that the public, if they don't comment on it the first reader, they'll have an opportunity to, if the administration comes back and say it's okay?
Yeah, what I'm saying is that as it is now, just trying to, because I know that we have certain legal requirements in getting this done. I don't want to wait 2 weeks to send this to the board and then delay it an additional 2 weeks just to find out this one question. If the administration comes back 2 weeks from now or a month from now, we will already be in the process of having this out there. Before it even gets to first reader, where public comment will be allowed, either citizenship will be added or not added.
Okay, then I'm okay because the citizenship won't be there with this one that's going out. We're only
No.
considering it. So I'm okay. I'm okay.
Okay.
I'm okay. All right.
And if, if the administration's fine with it, if the policy director is fine with it, once
Right.
it's committee and then goes to first reader, there'll be public comment then, and then also public comment again on second.
Okay. All right, that's good. Thank you.
Okay. And so is there a motion to approve this? With the amendments from, I guess, General Counsel's office?
So moved.
Is there a second?
That's okay.
All right. All those in favor, please say aye.
Bye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. It's unanimous. So Mr. Cooper will prepare the memo for the board, and we'll send this over to the board. All right, next we'll move to item 0125, non-discrimination. I will turn this one over to the administration again.
Good evening again, and thank you for considering our suggested revisions to this policy. The administration is recommending the addition of gender identities and sexual orientation to the list of protected classes in the standard section on page 1 of the policy. We are also recommending updates to the contact information for inquiries related to Title 6, 88, and Title 9, as well as Section 504, which are listed in the policy.
Okay, I appreciate that. And Ms. Ahmed, I would assume you would have a similar request here, is that correct?
Yes, please. And I also have another question as well. When I have the floor,
Yeah.
Mr. Chair.
Of course you have the floor, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. One question for administration is the reason why we're not putting definitions for protected classes because we want to keep them open for interpretation and also allow for flexibility with changing cultural relevancy?
So normally, if you look in other laws, the protected classes aren't specifically defined, and that is in an attempt to not narrow what you get. If you want to take, for example, religion, if you attempted to define religion, you may leave out what someone considers to be their sincerely held religious belief. So in attempted to keep it open and flexible and make sure that you're being as inclusive as you possibly can to the laws, generally they aren't defined in most places.
Okay, thank you. That's what I figured. I just wanted to be sure about that. And then also, like I said before, that the request to add citizenship status to the protected classes applies for this one as well. Thank you. I yield back, Mr. Burrows.
Okay. Is there a motion on this?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
And I believe we have the same understanding, just for the record, of what we did in the first one. Administration is going to go research, bring it back. But as for now, we're going to approve it as is. There's been properly moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay. It's unanimous. All right. I didn't anticipate us moving through this agenda so quickly. At our next meeting, I'll add 3 more policies. So Ms. Murray is like, no, you will not. All right. Well,
You have to leave room for carryover.
Right. Well, I guess the first one we don't have a lot of carryover, but okay. Next, we will move to item 3.4, and I will turn this one over to the administration initially to state their reservations that I believe that they have. So I guess I'll turn this over to Ms. White.
Actually,
Well,
good evening. I will be responding with our reservations for policy 5122. So we are appreciative of the changes that some of the changes that have been made, but the one area that we are very concerned about is the 2.0 GPA as it relates to the section where it says that there will be a 1/4 probationary period if a student falls below the 2.0 GPA. And we, first of all, based on the regulations, which are pretty clear that we are supposed to be making sure that students are moving successfully towards graduation, as well as the need to have that standard in order to ensure that, we feel strongly that they should continue that the 2.0, they can never get off the 2.0. They must have a 2.0 throughout their entire time as they are engaged or involved in participating in the athletics or the extracurricular activity. And the fact that they would possibly have that probation period really does not mean then that we're maintaining the GPO, because there is that break in time. And we did provide a memo that sort of lays out specifically what our concerns are about that.
okay, and so just so that I am fully understanding the administration's current position, is that you believe that there should be a consistent 2.0 requirement. And I believe at one point in time, and I believe I read it in your memo, that you believe not having that 2.0, you believe that the probationary period is a violation of COMAR. Do you still hold that belief, or have things changed?
We're saying that in defining that one of the requirements is that you have to establish standards of participation which assure that students that are involved in interscholastic athletics are making satisfactory progress towards graduation. We are interpreting that what the satisfactory progress towards graduation needs to be that 2.0. We're stating that we believe strongly that that standard 2.0 GPA during their entire participation time needs to be in place so that we can ensure they are making satisfactory progress towards graduation.
But you're not saying the probationary period is against or in violation of a COMAR regulation?
We're saying that our interpretation that it's as far as interpreting it being able to make satisfactory progress, we believe a 2.0 standard, GPA standard is meeting that requirement in the regulations.
I guess just to make sure that I fully understand it, because I hear what you're saying, but I'm not sure that my question's being answered. Do you believe that having a probationary period is a violation of COMAR?
I think depending on the circumstance, it could absolutely be a violation of COMAR. And I think, I also spent some time just looking at policies across the state that to talk about academic eligibility for extracurricular activities and interscholastic athletics. And it's like everyone that I read, they talked about the 2.0 GPA as maintaining it throughout the entire, and they're very clear, maintaining it throughout the entire participation period that they're involved with the athletics.
Okay, thank you. And just to give the public some context around this, I work with a lot of students who are in the criminal justice system, frankly, students who are in juvenile court. And I have done countless home visits and sat with those students and their parents. And unfortunately, in Prince George's County, when you go into juvenile court, it's a sea of Black and brown, mostly boys, that are disconnected in some ways from the school system, and disconnected for a host of reasons. Some, need to work, and that's why they're not connected. Some are just not engaged because they don't have community there. They don't feel safe there. They're struggling. And so they're slipping through the cracks. And so, and I always find it very interesting that generally, I've seen on several occasions where the attorneys, the judges will ask the student, what do you want to be when you grow up? And so many of them say, I want to go to the NFL. I want to be in the NBA. And will they all make it there? Probably not. But there is something that they are interested in that we can provide them. And this does not just apply to sports, it also applies to extracurricular activities. I mean, I think, the place where we want our most vulnerable students is in the presence of a loving adult that has their best interests at heart. I think one of the worst things that we can do is disconnect a child who is already struggling from the school system. When I initially authored this, it was to remove the GPA requirement. I actually wanted to have an attendance requirement instead, which pretty much said, look, if you fall under 2.0, I'm not happy about it. But if you can come to school every day and go to class every day, that's the start. That's a standard that will get you closer to graduation. And so after meeting with the principals at the CEO's request, I compromised and I kept the 2.0 requirement in there. And instead came up with a probationary period, which said that if you are a student and you are interested in athletics or extracurricular activities, and you fall below a 2.0, in order to participate for just that one semester, you have a one semester, one quarter trial period, you must participate in student academic improvement agreements between your staff, your coach, and your parents and yourself. Tutoring programs, we know that when students are in intense tutoring programs, they're more likely to be successful in their academics. Mentoring and monitoring programs, we know that with the right mentors, and all the research shows that when you have that loving adult guiding the student in the right way, they do better. Academic support classes, counseling, because we know that what happens in the home and what happens in the community impacts the child academically. And so counseling's on the list, study halls on the list, outreach programs are on the list. And so all of these things are levers and strategies that we can use to save our children. And so at the last board meeting, there was talk about, oh, this is lowering the standard and colleges don't do that. Well, I thought it was well known, but not every student is going to go to college. And policy is actually intended to help those students who are on the brink of not even graduating. And I can go on and on and on, but just for the public, because we dove right into it, and I wanted to provide some context with what the goal is. And I'm okay with trying to get to the goal in different ways, which is why I've already compromised with the administration several times. And I thought they were going to be okay with it, but it seems like there's a shifting target, unfortunately. That's the goal. And however we get there, if there's a better idea, a better policy, a better program, I would love to hear it. But I have vetted this through principals. I vetted this through coaches. I vetted this through individuals who deal with students who are in the juvenile justice system. And we've reached some consensus around this. And so with that, I will turn it over to Ms. Ahmed, hand was up, and then Ms. Mickens-Murray, and then Mr. Saran Ruiz, and then Ms. Williams.
Thank you, Chairman Burrows. I know that our board has been going back and forth with this policy for several months. And so I took a really clear look at the letter that was posted on board docs from the CEO around the claims that, passing this policy, we could become out of compliance with Maryland state regulations. So I looked at the state law that was cited in the letter. I looked at that specific article, And I didn't find anything that related to requiring a GPA. And then I also looked at I went even like a bit broader to look at the broader article. And I didn't see anything related to GPA and grade point averages. So I thank you, Ms. Welsh, for clarifying the situation a little bit. And what I'm hearing is that the system sets standards for what is required. The system sets standards in order to make sure that folks are on track for graduation. I feel like we can set standards to make sure that students are on track for graduation, and still have them participate in extracurricular activities and still have them participate in athletics. And in fact, a probationary period would help get folks back on track that maybe wouldn't already be receiving those resources to get back on track without taking away a thing that is very important to them, that keeps them in school and keeps them engaged. And so when we're talking about standards and the system setting standards, I would argue that it's the Board of Education of the system that sets the standards for educational excellence in the county. And I think that this policy and moving it forward is setting the standard. And so I wanted to put that there, but I did think that maybe what could be helpful for this group in this committee is if we had an idea of, are there other jurisdictions in the state that allow a probationary period? And so I wanted to ask, maybe as a follow-up item, Mr. Cooper and Ms. Ellis, if we could research or be provided some research of, is a probationary period an unusual thing? Or are there other school districts or other public entities that have probationary periods for athletes, and what that looks like? Is that okay, Mr. Cooper, Ms. Ellis?
Certainly.
Okay, awesome. That's all, Mr. Chair. I yield back.
Yeah, and to your point, and I appreciate you doing that follow-up, Mr. Cooper, but I know, Ms. Welsh, you said you looked at neighboring school districts. I just want to raise one that I found a few moments ago, just with the cursory search. In Anne Arundel County, they have a policy on student athletics and eligibility. And they also have a probationary period of 16 days. An academic student who is academically ineligible, they may not play games or wear any part of the team uniform at games during the 16-day probationary period, but they will still be able to go to all of the practices, is my understanding, still attend the game, still be a part, still be connected. And at the end of that 16-day probationary period, they're successful, they're able to reintegrate back onto the team. And so I'm not sure what school districts, it might be helpful if you could send us, Ms. Welsh, what school districts you looked at, so we're not doing double work. And we can bring that back to the committee. And next is Ms. Judy Mickens-Murray.
Thank you, Chairman Burrows. The issue for me is not really the probationary period. The issue for me is the academic grade 2.0. It has been 2.0 all of my existence on this earth, and it has been 2.0 the entire time I have lived in Prince George's County. Now, when I listen to you talk, I hear a lot of I statements, and that says to me what Chairman Burrows wants. What I'm not hearing is the administration has made their recommendation. I believe the administration sets the standards for academic education. I also believe that the Board of Education verifies, validates that. Now, if you can show me in the past, because when my son played football, and he was never, I wouldn't say he was under 2.0, but what would happen to the students that were below 2.0, they still attended, they still sat on the side, they just didn't participate in the sport. And then one other thing, Mr. Burrows, I appreciated being invited to your pipeline meeting yesterday. And my question is, the young lady that gave the presentation, did you run this by her? Is she in support of changing the 2.0? I'm in favor of probation, not a problem for me. It's the 2.0 that I have a problem with. So
Just to answer your question, Ms. McIsmarian, thank you for attending. And I don't know if they've done it yet, but I've asked them to send you all of the past meetings, so they're on YouTube.
I appreciate that.
For your appointment, and that way, just to make sure you're fully up to speed. So this policy does not remove the 2.0 requirement. This policy keeps the 2.0 requirement. My initial draft was to remove the 2.0 requirement. After meeting with the principals at the superintendent's request, I went back and I compromised. I changed it. So the 2.0 is still the standard under this policy.
Okay, but the additional work on the staff is what you are changing with this policy, right? Because my understanding at the last meeting that we discussed this, I thought the CEO said the students already get the tutoring and all of those other special attention, I think, that you're seeking. It's already in place, isn't it?
It depends on what school you're at, frankly.
Aren't we in Prince George's County? You saying it's different in each school?
Absolutely. I mean, if
Really?
yeah, it might be helpful offline. I would like you to speak to some coaches who are on the ground. And I'm using I statements because I didn't realize that was an issue, but I worked on this. At the request of the superintendent, I met with principals, I met with coaches, I looked at a lot of research. So it's not just what I want. Frankly, I don't benefit in any way from passing this policy.
Okay, so maybe what we need is you and I need to talk.
Sure.
Maybe I am misunderstanding what you're trying to convey, because from where I sit, it's already in place. We keep the 2.0 in place. The students already get the extra tutoring. They already get the extra attention. And then after the session that I attended yesterday with, I can't remember her name, I'm so sorry. But I thought it was excellent. The way the the way some schools are embracing having conversations with students so that they will feel connected. So I was wondering if there was a way to get where you want to get through her program and not require additional work for the staff to monitor. And I don't even know how many students you're talking about, but that could be additional work that we just can't afford for the staff to do right now.
Yeah, I think the additional, and I hear you and I respect where you're coming from. I'm happy to speak with you offline, but I think the additional work is their job. I mean, it is your job to make sure that our most vulnerable students stay connected and get all of the tutoring and mentoring and resources that they
But
need.
it's in place. They have it. Show me where they don't have it.
And
Show me where that's not in place.
And I'm happy.
That's what I need to see.
And I appreciate you communicating what you need, and I will oblige.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Saran Ruiz.
Thank you, Chair Burrows. I first want to add that I really appreciated the comments by Board Member Ahmed, and I truly agree with this. I think tying back to the Anne Arundel County point, I actually had a talk yesterday with their student member of the board there, Boomy. We're good friends, and we had a good conversation about really just how it is there and how beneficial and fair it is for the students. I think it's not about saying that colleges don't do this. I think it's about saying that Prince George's County, the Board of Education, the administration gives their students second chances. Doesn't believe that just because they go below 2.0, that they're basically not worth it. They're not worth to be on a team. And I think a point that could be brought up is, the outside adult world may not give second chances. But I think that if we start in our schools saying that second chances aren't to be given, then we continue to foster this mindset with the new generations. And so I think that this policy specifically really is just fair to our students who are just falling back but cling on, I guess, athletics and clubs to stay in our schools. I did have a question I know Board Member Burrows, when you mentioned removing the 2.0 GPA, you had mentioned a attendance requirement. Is that still included in the policy or was that removed?
It's not. Initially when we were, because there needed to be an objective standard of eligibility, I supported attendance because, all of the data shows that when students are in school longer, they're less likely to commit crimes, or they're going to be better off. But because the principals were so adamant about keeping the 2.0, and I understand the way that it works. I mean, I know the administration signals, frankly, which way they want their employees to go on these issues. So I heard it, I understood it. I was trying to compromise. So it's not the attendance, but it's the GPA.
Okay. Thank you. So I just wanted to get that clarified, and I'm not sure if that could still happen when it comes to the probation period. I think that having the attendance requirement, tying back to the point where we must, I guess, set standards where students are prepared for graduation. I think if we bring in this attendance requirement, I think that adds to it. I guess I'm not sure if I'm like connecting right now, but
Oh yeah, you are. I agree with you. I would like Mr. Cooper, if you can go back and look. Let's say, hey, if you're in this probationary period, you have to have like 90% perfect attendance in order to be a part. I think that's a great, because that's all this is. It's like, how do we further connect students to the school and their education? And so I think it's worth exploring that attendance piece and what that would look like if we added it in.
so I yield back. Thank you.
No, thank you. I think that's a phenomenal point that you raised, Board Member Saron Weiss. Next, we'll have Board Member Sonia Williams.
Thank you. So I'm trying to understand, and maybe you can answer me quickly, Committee Chair Burrows. Our goal or the focus of this change is for disconnected youth, correct?
That is the goal, so that our students who are struggling academically, they're not further removed from the thing that connects them to the school, which could be an extracurricular activity, could be the choir, it could be the band, it could be art, it could be.
Yeah, I'm not distinguishing what activity they do after school, but I'm saying the focus of this is for disconnected youth. And so that's sort of what I want to understand. If we were to put kids, all of the PGCPS students who could do extracurricular activities in a pot, and then we say, okay, those kids that are disconnected, we remove those kids. Then there's still kids left in the pot that are connected and engaged in the school system. Our focus of this policy is to focus on those kids that have been pulled out of the pot that are disconnected because they're not in the pot because they don't want to be in the school. So we're talking kids that are outside of the pot or disconnected. That's the focus of the students that you're talking about that would be affected in this with this change. Or are we talking about all the students, if we put all the kids in a pot that are eligible for extracurricular activity, this policy is supposed to focus on all students, not just the disconnected students?
This policy is for a student who is struggling academically, who falls beneath the 2.0 requirement. This will give them an opportunity to engage with their passion, the thing that they care about, the thing that motivates them, the thing that drives them. With these supports in place, the counseling, because that's an issue, the study hall, the tutoring, that by mandating these wraparound services and supports, they will also do better academically. This is
awesome. And so now let's talk about the pot of kids, all of the kids that are eligible for to participate in extracurricular activities. We're now focusing on those, or we're pulling them and we're putting them on a plate of kids that struggle academically. We don't want those kids to get too far out of the pot. So we're pulling out those kids. So that is what I'm understanding. We're talking about those kids, not just those that are disconnected. We're talking about all kids, connected and disconnected, but just those that are struggling academically. So this is the data that I'd like to see. I'd like to see what that looks like in the last 3 years. What kids are we talking about? What is the percent of those kids that are eligible to participate in in extracurricular activities, that's struggling academically, that because they fell below 2.0, they now moved into the penal system. And so that's what I'm trying to understand. What is the universe of kids that we're talking about? Because if we're talking about a high number, then I can see that let me say this. There would be an impact on the academic success of PGCPS overall. And I understand that you said that the 2.0 has now been moved off of the table, but what I'd like to know is, in the current, so this is item number 2, in the current situation, what happens to those kids that fall below a 2.0 GPA? What happens, and what is that number? So 1 and 2 are sort of tied together. What happens to those kids? Because as a sister of a brother who is a coach at a school in PGCPS and has been for years, I have watched him, because I had to pick up his kids and drop them off to him. I've watched him and what he does to his kids, meaning providing support to those kids that are struggling academically. And we've talked at family dinner tables about kids that are struggling and how they support those kids. So what I really want to understand is, what is the universe of kids that we would impact if there was a change? So that was one point. And I think Ms. Mickens-Murray already mentioned, coaches do a lot to support their athletes. And some of it is probably more to the improvement of the team versus the student. The coaches do everything they possibly can do to keep their kids on the team, especially those that are stars, that are the number ones. And I know we don't want to forget about the second string, but I know that those coaches that have those superstars, they will do everything possible, including using their own money, to give those kids tutoring to make sure they keep that GPA. Let's see. And I think Miss Judy's Mickens-Murray mentioned about how those kids currently interact when something happens. So I think she covered that. So that was just my comments on this. I think that we need a little bit more data to understand the universe of students that would be affected if we make this change. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cooper. We can charge you with getting that data. And I just want to end on one thing that just said, that we have coaches that dig into their pockets to help pay for tutoring. And I can tell you that that's amazing. And a lot of coaches do that. There are some coaches who don't. And I'm not sure that burden should be left on, some coaches can afford it, some coaches can't. Some coaches are struggling to make ends meet and some aren't. And so I think us, no matter where you go to school, no matter what the financial, socioeconomic status of your coach is, we want to make sure you get these resources. Mr. Cooper.
Yes, I just wanted to reconfirm Vice Chair Williams' request, and I will definitely work with my administrators and colleagues to get it. My understanding is that she wanted, one, to find out how many students each year are impacted by falling below the 2.0, so you understand the pool. And the second question was just to get details, what happens to a student once they drop below? Are they removed immediately? And I guess how are they connected with academic support? Is that accurate reflection of your request? Perfect. Okay, I'll work with that and get back to you guys.
Thank you. And I see Ms. Mickens-Murray has her hand up.
Yeah, quick question, Chairman Burrows. Are we looking for an emotional connection? Is that what we are seeking with this policy for these children? An emotional connection to an adult that cares, as your words?
So this policy deals with first and foremost academics. It says that if you fall beneath the academic threshold, you have to go to study hall. There must be an academic contract, which generally looks like your parent, your teacher, your coach, all agree on your expectations. For example, you come to class every day, you do your homework. And so it is academic, but as we know from restorative justice and restorative practices, relationships matter. And oftentimes a coach, it's amazing to see. I have watched coaches in court able to get our young people to comply more than their parent can, right? And so those relationships between a healthy adult are important. And when you disconnect our most vulnerable youth and you send them out into the community, and while we were here, I was just looking up some statistics, and I'll send everyone, Mr. Cooper, you can make sure that I send this report to everyone. The Harvard Graduate School of Education did a study and showed that between the hours of 3 and 6 p.m. are the peak time for juvenile crimes, and the time period when teenagers are more likely to be involved in car crashes. It talks about 62% of parents agree that after-school programming and sports and activities help their children gain workforce development skills. And so it's not just some, emotional connection, even though that is important too. This is about the academic success, the social, emotional, and academic success of our young people.
Okay, I appreciate all of that, but I guess then my question is, since you identified young males, correct? Do you have
As
an
an
age
example.
group? Do you have an age group that you were looking at?
This will be the standard for any student.
I know, but you mentioned earlier that you watch these students through your work or through the juvenile court system. And I'm
Correct.
just asking you, are we talking about high school students? Are we talking about middle school students? Are we talking about both?
Yeah, in my opinion, I would hope this would apply to both. I believe that the sports standards are specific to high school, though. When I look at age 2 under C, academic eligibility, it only speaks to high school students.
Okay, so for this discussion and this policy, we're looking at high school young males.
No,
Correct.
there are females who are also caught up. I use young males of color as an example, but this would apply.
Okay, so we're looking at cohorts. We're looking at all students in high school
Who are struggling academically.
Okay, so it's not limited just to sports though, right? Because
No, ma'am.
extracurricular activities are many things, drama clubs, all kinds of clubs, right?
Absolutely.
Tennis club, but that's still sports. But okay, so I like what the student board member said, Mr. Ruiz. And maybe staff could go back and look at the coaches that make attendance a requirement to the activities when they are struggling close to or below this 2.0, and bring some data back to us about how many students are impacted. And this is male and female at the high school level, correct? All
Yes,
right,
that's
I
what
would
this
be
policy
interested in
applies
that.
to.
I would be interested in that because I still go back to the first discussion I had with your pipeline people yesterday. And I believe somewhere in the middle is a solution. So I just want to get that piece for me, okay? And then I'll look at the YouTubes that you're having them send me.
And Ms. Vickers Murray, I appreciate you coming to this from a lens of finding a common ground and solution. That means a lot to me. And I think that spirit will support the committee moving forward. So I appreciate you I see you trying to figure it out. So I thank you.
Yes, always.
No, I definitely appreciate that. Ms. Williams, I don't know if your hand was up from last time or if this is a new hand. Okay, you finished?
I have a new question.
Okay, your hand's up. Okay.
Yeah. In making change, you expect something to be different or changed. So I would love to know, in changing this, what is your expected outcome? What do you see? What does success look like to you? And when do you think that we would see that?
That's a great question. And I want to circle back to the purpose that's outlined on one of the policies. And it's purpose section 2. Many struggling students require a helping hand or a bridge to help them achieve their academic goals. This policy is designed to be that bridge. It is the intent for the Board of Education and PGCPS leadership to provide academic support to struggling students by being inclusive rather than exclusive. To that end, this policy intends to be a vehicle for partnership with administration, school principals, coaches, and teachers to reach students before they fail and to provide the fullest participation in academic, athletic, and other extracurricular activities that promote school pride and personal pride in the academic lives of the students. And so when I think about what outcome we hope to achieve, there's a young Alvaro out there who is just in love with student government, but struggling to maintain his grades, and he gets under 2.0, let's say he's at a 2.9, that his passion for his student government or his basketball or his baseball motivate him to meet these standards, which
That was my dog. I'm sorry, my dog.
Okay. My dog is laying over there waiting for a walk. She walks up every now and then, but that, we'll say, you got to go to study hall every day. We're going to get you a mentor. This isn't the easy way out. This isn't a gift, a free for all. You guys get to just play, do whatever you want. No, this is more intense. And at the end of this intense intervention, this is what I would call it. At the end, I would call this probationary period an intervention. At the end of this intervention,
What you're seeking is an intervention. Okay, different.
Yeah. At the end of this intervention period, where we have your coach, your teacher, your mom, your principal, all working together, we're getting you counseling because there are so many things that happen outside the home that impact grades. This intervention, probationary period, and maybe we should call it an intervention period. I'm open for all the feedback. At the end of this intervention, you're going to be better off as a student, and you're going to be more whole and more complete. So that's what it would look like in my eyes.
So I appreciate that, and I appreciate you reading the purpose of this. When I listen to the purpose, yes, I listen to the purpose, Shadow. When I listened to the purpose, there was a lot of information that just sort of challenged me for measure of success. And so I would like for us to be a little bit clearer by understanding, and maybe we can do this, we can study to see what it looks like. If we understood what each school does, and it's because, when you're talking outside of the athletic department, because that's sort of where I was focused with this policy. My focus was on those athletes. But if we understood where those differences lie on how students become disconnected because of the fact that they feel disconnected when they drop below a 2.0, then maybe it's not a policy change, maybe it's a procedural change where we give more procedures and concrete ideas on what we expect schools and coaches to do to support those kids that are challenged academically. Because if we're not changing the 2.0 requirement, if we're doing something, if we're putting in writing what is already occurring, there necessarily will not be a change. But if we change the procedure where we give school buildings specific directions on what to do, we may find more consistency in what is being done by each of the principals. Because I hear words that are not measurable in my mind, but we want to see concrete changes in the school system. So maybe we need to understand better where there are inconsistencies and give procedures to tell them specifically what to do.
And I'm open to hearing whatever you can come up with in that regard. I, to be candid, support the policy. I'm interested in setting a standard, which is what this body is charged to do under the law. And I can say with absolute certainty that it's very hit or miss. As you mentioned earlier, we have some coaches who are taking money out of their personal pockets, and we have some coaches who are not. And we should not be relying on economic status of some coaches to do what the system, in my opinion, should be doing. And we can have that debate,
Yeah. And so that's why I think more data on where their differences are, we can sort of give direction and understand where those coaches that are spending money, we can say, okay, you are not allowed to spend money. Please fill out this form to request, whatever that process is. Mm-hmm. So I think that we need to know more of where we're inconsistent so that if a policy change is necessary, we can be more precise in the policy narrative so that when procedures are put together, they understand exactly where we're trying to go.
Yeah, I appreciate that feedback. I think ultimately, what you've mentioned is important because it's the desired outcome, and we have to be outcome driven. And so, like I said, today this is the best way I see us getting there. If there's a better way of getting there, I hope to see it at our next committee meeting. We could work offline to figure that out. Ultimately, it'll be up to the committee to decide and kick it back to the full board. But I agree with you about being outcomes focused in this. I see Mr. his hand up.
Real quickly, I just want to go back to Mickey Murray and ask her to repeat her request for data. I just want to make sure I get it correctly when I transmit this communication to administration. You asked for some information?
Okay, yes, Mr. Cooper, what I'm looking for is, we're talking about more than sports now. We're talking about extracurricular activities across the high schools. And that's what I understood Chairman Burrows to say. We're looking at the high schools. So we want to know, how are they treating the students? What measures do they have in place today to help a child who goes below a 2.0? And we just want to know what they do in that particular school. Some of them may require them to be in attendance. Some of them may require them to get tutoring. Some of them may require different things. We want to know what those different things are.
Yep. Okay, that's similar to Ms. Williams' request, so I'll combine that together and you guys be copied on that. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I just got a message from someone in the community who's watching saying that I need to fix my camera angle, but the meeting's almost over. So I'm just maneuvering my house. Okay, maybe this is better. Okay. All right. Well, I think we have our follow-ups with that. I don't think we need a vote today on this. I think we are all under the same understanding of what will occur next, unless there's a desire for a vote. I think we might be. Okay, not hearing any requests for a vote. I'll now move to items 4.1. There are no items of 4.1. Next steps, Mr. Cooper will compile all of the feedback as it relates to 5122 and be prepared to brief the committee at our next meeting. The administration will look into and Mr. Cooper will look into the citizenship edition by Ms. Ahmed. We will forward 3.2 and 3.3 for the full board to send out for public comment. And those are the next steps. I see a hand from Ms. Valerie Irvin.
Thank you, Mr. Burrows. My question has to do with what's the time frame on getting this information back to you? Because board member Mickens Murray asked Mr. Cooper for some items that may take a substantial amount of time. It depends on what is her sample. Is there a sample of schools that she would like for us to report back on, or all high schools? So I'm just curious about that because I'm not sure how long it will take. It's the first week of school and it's going to be, it might be a heavy lift. I'm just trying to get.
I'm trying to do what makes sense. So if you could, how many high schools do we have? God bless you. How many high schools do we have?
Actually don't know the answer to the question. Does any of the member of the board know how many high schools were?
It's like 24 or 26.
Around
26.
Okay, so
Yeah, that's a pretty small.
You know, what I would say, Ms. Irvin, if you could just, whenever you can bring back, if it's not satisfactory to Ms. Mickens Murray, then just communicate to her. I'm sure you and your team will meet tomorrow based off the discussion. And whatever you all come up with, let's have Mr. Cooper communicate that to Ms. Mickens Murray. If it's not satisfactory to Ms. Mickens Murray, we'll communicate that to you. Once you're able to kind of think about what we're requesting, you might have a easier way of compiling or collecting the data, but just stay in constant contact with board member Mickens Murray through Mr. Cooper. And so I think that's probably the best way to proceed, because I'm sure there's a lot of groundwork and research that you all will do based off of the meeting today. And so whenever you come up with your strategy for how to meet the needs of the committee, let's just run that strategy by Mr. Cooper, Ms. Mickens Murray. And if there's a better way of getting it, or easier way, or if there's a way of, this is almost what you're looking for, but might satisfy your point, just run that past her and she might be amenable to it.
I appreciate that, Mr. Burrows. Mr. Cooper, you and I will talk.
All right. Well, we're now ready to adjourn. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved. Second.
All right. Being properly moved and seconded, there is a motion to adjourn. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Let's have it. Well, thank you all so much, committee members. Let's stay in contact around some of these issues between now and our next meeting, so that we can work all of these issues out. Oh, and also Mr. Serrano Ruiz, Mr. Cooper, on the attendance point. I forgot to mention that. All right. Thank you all so much.
Good night.
Good night.